I still remember the exact time the radio crackled to life that night, because I had looked down at my watch the second I heard it, 1:47 a.m. And in 3 years of working as a night ranger at Yellowstone National Park, I had never heard dispatch sound that nervous before. "Ranger Miles, we just got a distress signal from Trail 9, the dispatcher said, her voice thin and shaky through the static. "Female hiker, early 30s, alone, says someone is standing outside her tent calling her name." I sat up straighter in the truck and asked for the exact location. But before she could answer, another voice came through the radio, cutting across her words. A woman whispering so softly, I almost thought I imagined it. "Please tell him not to answer me." Then the line went dead. For a few seconds, I just stared at the speaker mounted on the dash while the forest outside my windshield stood perfectly still under the moonlight. The pine trees silver at the edges, the dirt road empty except for drifting fog hugging the ground. Trail 9 was on the northern side of the park, an older backcountry route visitors rarely used anymore after a rock slide closed part of the upper ridge. And the few calls we got from that area were usually lost campers or black bears sniffing around food packs, not terrified whispers in the middle of the night. I restarted the engine and drove with the headlights cutting a narrow tunnel through the trees, trying to convince myself this was just another frightened tourist who had let the dark get into her head. Because people heard strange things in the wilderness all the time, branches rubbing together, elk calls echoing through the valley, their own fear turning ordinary sounds into something worse. But halfway there the radio came alive again, and this time, the voice that came through made my hands tighten around the steering wheel so hard my knuckles hurt, because it was my own voice. "Miles," it said calmly, almost gently, "don't come up the trail." The truck nearly slid off the road when I hit the brakes. I stared at the radio as static hissed from the speaker, then grabbed the mic and said, "Dispatch, did you hear that?" But there was no answer, only the low crackle of an open, dead channel. For the first time since I started this job, I thought about turning the truck around, calling it in, waiting for sunrise and backup, but somewhere out there a woman might actually need help. And fear doesn't disappear just because you decide not to look at it. So I kept driving until I reached the old wooden trail sign for Trail 9. The parking area was empty, except for one small rental SUV, covered in dust, its driver's door hanging slightly open. I stepped out into the cold, and the silence hit me immediately, because national parks are never truly silent. There are insects, wind, distant animals, but that night, it felt like the entire forest was holding its breath. I took my flashlight, checked my sidearm out of habit more than expectation, and called out, "Park Ranger." My voice disappeared into the trees, and nothing answered. The beam of my light found the beginning of the trail, then a line of fresh footprints pressed into the damp earth, leading uphill. One set belonged to hiking boots, the other looked barefoot. I told myself I was seeing it wrong because no one walks barefoot through mountain trails at night, but the longer I stared, the clearer they became. Human-shaped prints, pale in the mud, moving beside the hiker's tracks for several yards before vanishing completely, as if whoever made them had simply stepped off the earth. My stomach tightened, and for the first time that night I felt something deeper than nerves settle into my chest, the kind of cold instinct that tells you something is wrong before your mind can explain why. About a quarter mile up the trail, I found the tent just off the path in a small clearing between the pines. It was zipped shut from the outside. The lantern hanging from a branch above it swayed slowly, even though there was no wind. "Man," I called, stepping closer. "This is Park Service." No answer. I crouched, unzipped the flap and shined my light inside. The tent was empty, sleeping bag open, phone on the ground, one hiking boot near the entrance. And in the center of the fabric floor, written in shaky lines, with what looked like dirt dragged by someone's fingers, were 5 words I still see in my head every time I close my eyes. "Each stole your voice too." Whoa. I stumbled backwards so fast I nearly fell. And at that exact moment, the radio on my belt hissed to life one more time, and in my own voice, from somewhere deep in the trees behind me, I heard it whisper, "Miles, don't turn around."